On April 4th, 1993, at Caesar's Palace in Paradise / Las Vegas, Nevada, we saw the world's largest toga party. Every wrestler, every crew member dressed to the nines, and Vince McMahon wanted to make sure that this was a spectacle that only the greatest in Roman history could appreciate. Years and years before the original tribal queef himself, Roman Reigns, came around, we got to see Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. And after this particular event ended, if only somebody had had the bright idea to do to Vince what they did to Julius Caesar. Et tu, Brutus! Ah! I'm John Retton with my review of WrestleMania 9 Becoming a Spectacle, a Peacock original, where they talk about the grand pomp and circus pants of WrestleMania 9. Hooray! WrestleMania 9! The worst WrestleMania of all time. Also, a fun fact about Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. Zoe Stark was actually there and said, "That's not the original Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. I was there." She was actually a consultant for the Cleopatra movie that Elizabeth Taylor was in, because she even tried to warn Julius Caesar before, et tu, Brute. Okay, enough dumping on Zoe Stark. Let's talk about who took a dump on the show. Vince McMahon. Probably should have chosen better phrasing than that, but let's just move on. So, I will say that I appreciated the deep dive into the archival footage, getting people that were there, even a super fan. They interviewed Vlad near the end. That was really nice. Always great to see Vladimir. They finally released that, Peacock original that they did, or documentary that they did a number of years after they filmed it. But WrestleMania 9 is widely regarded as one of, if not the worst WrestleMania of all time. It was during an interesting time period, a lot of good talking heads and some bullshit talking heads. Bruce Pritchard, Hulk Hogan, the self-serving asshole that he is, and yes, drew a fortune. A tremendous draw in professional wrestling. One of the biggest box office draws, at least in modern wrestling history, if not of all time. In all honesty, he was able to help take wrestling mainstream with Vince McMahon's help, but also Hulk Hogan was a once-in-a-generation talent. He truly was. But God, is he an insufferable prick about it, and lying out his goddamn ass. More on that later. I did note how much lying, back padding, and revisionist history will we see. I will say that they balanced enough of the actual facts with the bullshit. I will say that, though this was a beefy near 2 hours, and while it was nice to hear from people, they kept talking about WrestleMania 9 like, oh, if we hadn't done this, we wouldn't have gone, supernova like we did with all the, lavish sets and everything. The next time they did any lavish sets for any WrestleManias, yes, they would get bigger stages, but WrestleMania 10, 11, 12, 13, you didn't really have a lot of big stages and big, theatrical character stuff like they have, in recent years and everything. And don't get me wrong, WrestleMania 9 was a pivotal, as Dusty Rhodes might say, event as far as getting back with the old and out with the new, at least for a little bit, and further proof that Vince McMahon lost his goddamn mind here, and only here, never later. This is when the steroid trial stuff was ramping up, and I don't understand why they had 30 goddamn tapes for this. I mean, they shot all this footage. George Germanicus, he's an archivist. We even got to see footage of him there, and that was nice. It was nice to see what it meant to people that were actually still there in the company. It was such an undertaking that we wanted to document internally. Bruce Pritchard. Now, Bruce had a few decent lines here, but my God, Bruce Pritchard being the company guy, because they weren't going to have Vince involved in this. Now, Vince was mentioned. Vince was at times put over, and other times Vince was basically crapped on. I really need to choose better phrasing. Nelson Swegler was a senior operations manager, and apparently not very well liked. The talking heads, Hogan, they did have Luger, and they had Shawn, they had Undertaker, they had various executives, Charles Wright, a.k.a. the Godfather, Papa Shango, Kama Mustafa, the Supreme Fighting Machine, the Supreme Pizza Fighting Machine. I just wanted to see him fight Supreme Pizzas because I think that certainly would have been more interesting than the Undertaker feud. Brutus Beefcake, Scott Steiner, Rick Steiner, Bret Hart, and plenty of others. I love the old footage. I love seeing this time capsule because I was 12 when this event happened. And quite frankly, even at 12 years old, I was sick of Hogan. A lot of people that grew up on Hogan were sick of him because Hogan, as Arn Anderson said, I believe it was the Rise and Fall WCW documentary, Hulk Hogan always has been and always will be the biggest star in professional wrestling. If nobody knows anything about professional wrestling, they say, oh, that's that thing Hulk Hogan does. They know that. And, yeah, noted goddamn bigot, outed racist, admitted racist, and that's one thing that I think a lot of people try to gloss over. L.A. didn't, and I really love the fact that L.A. booed the fuck out of him, and he hasn't appeared since, because who the fuck was going to want to do that? No, yeah, the real American beer and all that stuff, but that was years and years after this. Colin Cowherd, that noted idiot, a guy that's pretty much a goddamn blowhard. He might know sports. He doesn't know shit about wrestling. And has crapped on wrestling before. So I don't really know why they got him here. We get tease of like stuff later. Hulk's injured. He won't be able to show up. It's because Randy Savage punched him out. And I'm going to tell you why I don't believe Hulk Hogan's story at all a little bit later on. Something happened. I mean, whether Hogan slipped because he fell down some stairs or whatever it was, there is no way that Hogan's story adds up. We get a bit of a brief thing about WrestleMania, 1 to 3 and stuff like that, and all the way to the end. But I want to talk about a couple things in regards to one thing about the narrative of this WrestleMania that seems to be forgotten, is it wasn't a bomb at the, with the buy rates. So, give me an example. WrestleMania 1 closed circuit, so we don't have any buy rates for that. Though apparently enough people did watch it that it was successful. The Wrestling Classic, their first technical pay-per-view, did like 47,000 pay-per-view buys. Mania 2, they skipped over Mania 2. Gee, I wonder why. Probably because it was dog shit. 250,000 pay-per-view buys, more closed-circuit stuff. WrestleMania 3 had 400,000 pay-per-view buys and 93,173. 78 to 80,000 is what I believe. WrestleMania 4, 585,000 or 485,000. And then WrestleMania 5 apparently has 767,000 pay-per-view buys. Which, that was a big, I believe, Mania 4 or 5 was the first one to be offered on full pay-per-view. WrestleMania 6, Hogan vs. Warrior, 560,000 pay-per-view buys. WrestleMania 7 goes down to 400,000 pay-per-view buys. And they had to take it out of, the big old Coliseum because they just couldn't, they couldn't get enough security. It had nothing to do with the fact that tickets bombed. They were mocking the Iraqi war or the Gulf or the Desert Storm War. You get the point. Been so many wars. They had Slaughter. Slaughter could have turned heel and burned Hogan's shirt, and it would have meant a whole lot more. But no, they couldn't do that. And I love Hogan. I loved Hogan having to battle a heel Slaughter because Slaughter was a great heel. Mania 7 still was successful. Mania 8, and they talked about Mania 8. Basil DeVito, I believe is his name. He said him and Linda McMahon were taking tickets, before this event. Just trying to get people in the building for the festivities and all that. And Mania 8, at the Hoosier Dome, that was the last stadium show they would do till Mania 17, actually, if you think about it. Because Mania 9 was in a parking lot, as they said. And Mania 10 was at Madison Square Garden. Mania 11 was in Hartford. WrestleMania 12 was at the Arrowhead Pond, I believe. Mania 13 was at the Rosemont Horizon. Mania 14 was in Boston. 15 was in Philadelphia. 16 was back in California, I believe at the Arrowhead again. And Mania 17 was in, I believe, it was the Astrodome? Was it the Astrodome? I'm trying to remember. Maybe I'm messing up that location with where Mania 25 was. I don't know. I know Mania 17 was in Texas. I know that much. I'm sorry. Forgive me. There are certain things that just zip through my head. But The whole point is Mania 8 had 390,000 pay-per-view buys. It was the last Hulk Hogan appearance. We go to SummerSlam 92. Oh, wait, no. SummerSlam 92, Hogan showed up, cut the album with Simon Cowell and all that, and wanted to help that Make-A-Wish kid to have really bad body odor and everything. And yeah, you know about the interview. You know what I'm talking about. If you don't, look up Hulk Hogan lies and in interviews, and you will understand. That did 280,000 pay-per-view buys. And yes, it was on tape delay, so that might have hurt the buy rate. But then we go to Survivor Series 92. That's down to 250,000 pay-per-view buys. Now, Survivor Series 91 wasn't exactly a picnic. Did well, didn't do as great as 90. And you had Tuesday in Texas right after that. So really, when you think about it, you go from Survivor Series in the end of November, Tuesday in Texas soon after, Royal Rumble 92, and then you go to Mania 8. That's 4 pay-per-views in basically about 4 months. Like, Mania 8 was at the beginning of April, but you get the point. So they were starting to really piss off their audience. They took out the Tuesday in Texas idea for 92. But after Survivor Series 92, we go to the Royal Rumble 93, 300,000 pay-per-view buys. Yokozuna wins the Rumble. Mania 9 did 430,000 pay-per-view buys. That's a big goddamn deal. It's the biggest buy rate since Mania 6. It was better than Mania 7. And as far as being an outdoor Mania, it was a little bit difficult as far as the elements. There were questions about that. But then you go to King of the Ring 93 for Hogan dropping the title to Yokozuna, a title that he really didn't need to have in the first place, but I digress. 245,000 pay-per-view buys. We go to SummerSlam 93 rather, 250,000 pay-per-view buys. So we go down 30,000. We don't get Hogan versus Brett because Hogan didn't want to do business with Brett. So, and he faced Yoko on a bunch of house shows leading up to that. So it's not like Hogan instantly disappeared after King of the Ring 93. He just wasn't on television. And then Survivor Series 93, we're down to 180,000 pay-per-view buys. The 94 Rumble, 200,000 pay-per-view buys. We dropped way down. And Mania 10 did 420,000 pay-per-view buys. So the whole point is, it's not like their business totally tanked. And yes, with Mania 8, they had relied on Hogan so much up to that point, even though fans were getting sick of him by, say, late 91 into the Royal Rumble 92, it was still going to take a bit to build some people back up. But they were getting things back up. And with Mania 9 doing the best buy rate, yes, some of that could have been because Hogan was coming back. But the whole point is, Hogan was much more detrimental to the success of World Wrestling Federation's, business with this event appearance, at least as far as what he ended up doing at the end, than he would have been had he just done the tag match. Or had he just shown up. Like, to be perfectly, I'll talk about it once we get to, more of the card and everything, but if Hogan had not wrestled on this show, would it have mattered? Like, genuinely, would it have mattered? Because you take a look at what's happening, you find out about the ticket sales not going all that well. Nobody really wanted to see him at King of the Ring 93. He was barely showing up on television. He made his Raw debut about 6 weeks before this event happened because Vince was so desperate to sell tickets. Well, maybe you should have been a smarter businessman and build people up better. But that being said, we're just going to get into the rest of this review. So Mania 1... Basil DeVito, yes dear, former executive, wrestling, WrestleMania created an on-ramp. Prior to WrestleMania, there was no on-ramp, and I think he's trying to say that WrestleMania took wrestling mainstream, which, yes, Vince did it better, but Starrcade, 83, Starrcade, 84, Bill Watts' Mid-South Wrestling, doing a big business in the Superdome, Texas Stadium for the David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions. The AWA doing outdoor shows, doing shows all over the country. Yes, Vince did it better as far as marketing and everything, but still, it's this narrative that they just can't get over. So, they talk about Leonard versus Lalonde, I believe is how it is. I barely remember that fight. I do remember Sugar Ray Leonard, obviously, but you had Sugar Ray versus a mullet. They did want to get into the boxing pay-per-view, spectacle, because boxing was massive business on pay-per-view. WWF did well. Crockett did well when Vince wasn't trying to stifle him. But my God, boxing just smashed the fuck out of wrestling. But they, had hype on SummerSlam 98, or in 98, 88. They went all the way back to there. No, they went all the way from SummerSlam to Primetime Wrestling in October of 88. And Kevin Sifleys, or Silfies, that is, former director of WWE, would have done better than Kevin Dunn, I just want to say, even though he kind of looked old in 93. Sugar Ray won, but it was a tough fight. And the people of Caesar's Palace were like, we kind of like how this was dressed up and everything. And also Caesar's Palace at night looked pretty goddamn cool because you couldn't see. It was basically in a parking lot. They were near the freeway from what I could tell, or at least a state highway. They have state highways out there in Paradise / Las Vegas. So, Primetime Wrestling at Caesars in 1991. I do remember that episode. Heenan and Monsoon just being tremendous. Let's blow Hogan is what I wrote down because that's what they were doing. Hulk Blogan, as it were. The crowd was getting sick of Hogan, as I said, by this point. That's why he had to go away. Also because of the Arsenio Hall appearance, where he admitted to only using steroids 3 times. It's not like he was the only wrestler that was using them. But goddamn it, Hulk, if you just admitted, yes, I did them, I don't do them anymore, because he had leaned out by that point. By the time we got to late 91, early 92, he was starting to lean out. And when he got to Mania 8, he was leaner than he had been. Jimmy Hart, bless Jimmy Hart. Great guy. Great man. One of the top managers of all time. Mania 8, Hogan talked about stepping away. Why'd you step away, Hulk? What was the reason? The steroid trial, the aforementioned Arsenio Hall thing, and people were getting tired of Hogan. And it can't be ignored. People were booing when he faced off against Sid in the post-match thing. Putting a hand to his ear. People were booing. Yeah, it was in the Knickerbocker Arena. No, Hulk, I said Knickerbocker. And we know exactly how Hulk would have pronounced that. But Taker basically says it was out with the old and with this new crop of, this new era of talent. Don't know why they need to include Giant Gonzalez there, but they showed Crush, Kona Crush, Bryan Adams, not the Summer of 69, not Run to You, not that guy. The guy that started out as Crush and Demolition, and that partnership and, whole unit went up quickly. I'm not saying it was Bryan Adams' fault, but I'm not saying that. They showed Doink, Matt Bourne, getting more appearances here than he has recently as far as mainstream wrestling coverage. I mean, you look at Dark Side of the Ring just a couple seasons ago. You had Fatu, a.k.a. Rikishi. You had the Steiners, you had Razor, you had Yokozuna. And Mania 8, yeah, they had 62,000 people there, but there were probably a lot of cheap tickets because they were having issues drawing in big stadiums. And yes, they drew for SummerSlam 92. That was in the UK, and they had a big market over there. The UNLV basketball controversy, I'm not going to go into all of it because, I was like 10 or 11 at the time. I do remember seeing on SportsCenter some of the stuff going on. And Vegas was pushing for Mania 9. They wanted it to be successful. Charles Wright wanted to wrestle on the card. He did. He wrestled Chico Santana, as it were, as Jesse Ventura would say, on the dark match. Fun fact, Tito Santana wrestled at the first 9 WrestleManias. And that was it. That was it. I mean, Tito, by that point, by the time he got to the first WrestleMania, had been wrestling for a number of years. So, they had a setup of 16,700 seats. The tickets range from $25 to $250. Take a look at what the tickets are for WrestleMania in Vegas, and that's actually probably why they decided to release this documentary now, since they had a bumper at the end. WrestleMania 41 biggest gate. It's going to be expected to be the biggest gate. You take a look at those tickets, and yes, I know it's a giant stadium, and costs go up, and I get that. But you cannot tell me charging obscene amounts of tickets, prices for tickets like that, is going to not price most of the working class people out. Give you an example. I'm recording this Friday morning/afternoon. SmackDown is going to be at the Climate Pledge Arena in just a few hours. I'm not going because when I checked for tickets, I checked for availability for the pre-sale and when the general sale went on. And even a halfway decent ticket, where I probably still wouldn't have been able to see shit, was about $200 a piece. I could have gone to Dynamite in Kent for Collision and Dynamite, like 2 events. I would have had to have gone to Kent on 2 separate days, and I don't even want to go there once. But 2 tickets plus parking, $500 for both. That all included, taxes and everything. I know the WWE feels they can price this up, but they're going to price out the working class. The whole point is $25 to $250 tickets. And Basil, yes, dear, I'm doing it, dear. I just can't help but do that's an MST3K reference. They wanted to make sure they had a $25 ticket. And plus, if you take a look at that goddamn venue, not a lot of great seats. Like, really, not a lot of great seats. In the parking lot, they paid Paradise and put up a parking lot. Ha ha! Boy, I should have started with that, but I just don't have jokes. The world's largest toga party. Caesar and Cleopatra coming at you, Cleopatra. At the Rumble. I recall that whole thing getting booed a little bit, but maybe I'm just misremembering. Sean Mooney, who? Bobby Heenan, bless Bobby Heenan. Sean Mooney, by the way, does a really good show. At least he used to. I don't know if he does it anymore, but I remember hearing some clips, and he's still, very gracious about his time in wrestling. He does know his stuff. Royal Rumble 93, Luger's debut as a narcissist, because Bobby Heenan couldn't say narcissist. And, Luger, I'll say this much, is pretty gracious. I mean, he had to trade one addiction for another. And he's going into the Hall of Fame. I mean, good for him. I have made my opinions on Luger known. Don't necessarily believe the change. And I find it funny that other fans are like, well, they're so forgiving of him, but they're not forgiving of others. Luger's, so much better. And Steve Austin's, so great. Plenty of wrestlers that are great also did bad things. I'm not saying that. They're all human, but there are levels to this. Nevertheless, the Giant Gonzalez, the airbrush bodysuit, and Bruce trying to defend it. Well, it was supposed to look different. You go put that suit on, you goddamn tub of lard, you piece of shit. I guarantee that if Bruce Pritchard had ever been in a fight in his life, he would have been lost. He would have been stretched. He would have been pretzeled. And then tried to eat himself because he's a disgusting fuck. And a Vince McMahon yes man. Why is Bruce still there? I mean, genuine question. Why is Bruce still there? They want to get some of the old guard out. Bruce does not need to be there anymore. Heenan tried so hard to sell Luger. 1993 was the first time the Rumble winner would face the champion at Mania. 1991. Thanks, Sam. You moron. Yes, okay, this is the first time the official title shot was on the line, but god damn it, do your fucking research. Yes, 88, Jim Duggan, or Dugan, as Bill Watts would say, was on, like, he won the Rumble, and I'm trying to remember what the fuck he did at WrestleMania 4. Was he even on the show? He might have been in the Battle Royal. Mania 5, Big John Studd won the 89 Rumble and was a special guest referee for Jake Roberts and Andre the Giant. WrestleMania 6, in the lead-up, Hogan won the 90 Rumble as the champion and faced off against the Ultimate Warrior, title for title. They gave it to Warrior and it didn't work because they didn't have any heels for him to work with. And also Warrior could sell tickets. He could do impressive shit until the bell rang. But and I thought that as a kid. Because once I look back on it, even at once I saw Ultimate Warrior against Hogan, God, at Halloween Havoc 98, good grief. But Hogan wasn't the champion in 91. Slaughter beat Warrior at that point and faced off against, so technically, and Flair won the title at, only time that the title was on the line at that point, and then 2016 happened when the champion entered. But the whole point is, yes, 1993 was the first official time, but god damn it, Sam, at least be factual. Yokozuna won the Rumble. Brett saw the press conference footage. Savage should still be here. Savage should have also wrestled on the show. It would have improved the show. I love Randy. Commentary was not his thing. Brett wanted to Brett had to make himself believe he was champion because he still didn't even believe in the lead up to winning against Flair in, I think, Saskatoon in October of 92 that he was going to win it. Hogan hated the acting process because he had to be up at 5 or 6 a.m. and get pampered and everything and be on set until 5 or 6 p.m. And oh, you poor baby. Getting paid a bunch of money. No, you know what he hated? He hated having the control and the stroke to control what he could do. I mean, take a look at his movies. Take a look at his fucking movies. When Thunder in Paradise was the best thing you were in a starring role, that's not a good thing. Yes, Rocky III, he was in a supporting role, a cameo as it were. I'm not knocking it. Rocky III was a big deal, but still, we did get to see Pat Harrison's booking book, his schedule book. That was cool to see. I'm amazed it didn't catch fire because Pat Harrison's burning in hell for what he did, and you know what he did. Hogan made his debut on Raw, and Raw had only been around for about not even 2 months at that point. February 22nd, 1993. They laid in the Brutus Beefcake. I'd lay in the Brutus Beefcake, but I'm afraid I'd be caught in his gravitational pull, and I feel bad about that. And yeah, we all age. We all gain weight. The man's got a double face, and also he supports the same crackpot that Hogan does, so fuck Brutus Beefcake. I wish that he hadn't survived the parasailing accident. So Jimmy was talking about how Hogan coming back can give, the company a shot in the arm and a little bit of gas, and poor choice of words there, Jimmy. I love Jimmy. It's just, good God. They were worried about how Brutus's face would hold up, what was left of it at that point. And they decided to pick Ted DiBiase and IRS Money Inc. to face them as champions. Face them in a tag team match. A lot of talents didn't necessarily want Hogan back, even though they understood he was a draw. It wasn't necessarily the great thing. Hogan, incredibly smug and disingenuous about all this. Hogan, coming right back in and getting put in the mix and everything, didn't want to be part of the tag team mix. He wanted to be in the main event. When he couldn't draw, he wasn't drawing in the main event in 92. Him and Sid, one of the worst main events of all time. And I love Sid. Rest in peace, Sid. But god damn it. A lot of just bullshit and horse shit here. We get Kevin Dunn. Somebody should have slapped him, I'm just going to say, because fuck Kevin Dunn. Fuck the fact that he still exists. Damn shame he didn't, frickin', get taken out in that fire with the tapes. We hear from a lot of the crew there, and this was cool, and I'm going to accelerate through some of this stuff because you get to see a lot of archival footage. $100,000 to dress up the sets. Nelson was apparently a bit of a dick, Nelson Swegler. How would the weather factor in? Because it was supposed to rain a couple days before, but it was sunny. Yet windy, because it does get windy out there from what I've heard. It was cool to hear from Charles Wright and and for him to, be there in front of, a hometown feel. Ringside Charlie, who is the very Italian guy that always went with Vlad to the wrestling shows. Bless Vladimir. They got to interview him and thinking, man, what? I wish I had half the infectious energy that he had. Sherry, I miss Sherry so goddamn much. They said to Howard Finkel, pizza, because he was dressed up like the Little Caesars mascot. The old promos, the betting on wrestling, those things factored in. I mean, my God, it's just ridiculous. The wrestlers didn't know what to think with the camera crews falling around. You could understand that. It would be kind of silly and kind of weird. But Savage joking with Linda, back when Linda could still keep both eyes on you. I'd feel bad, but Linda McMahon being the leader of the Department of Education and trying to actually get rid of the Department of Education, she's a dumb broad, and she deserves to be made fun of. So Brett, some of this footage has been shown before, because they did show some of this documentary, the lead up. But Brett, where all the girls are supposed to be girls here. Brett, I mean, Brett's admitted to cheating on his wife, so whatever. But just Brett, the whole thing about the girls with the pyro and the mirrors and stuff like that, it was going to be difficult. 3 hours of showtime. They were going to lift Yoko to the ring, but Yoko was already getting very big at that point. Hogan didn't rehearse. He showed up with a big black eye because Savage punched him out. Hogan said about the jet ski thing. I'm just going to skip to this. Scott Steiner said that Savage told him that. Hogan denied it and said a 700-pound jet ski, when he hit a wave, he felt. Now, I believe falling in the water, hitting a wave and everything, stuff like that, a jet ski could end up in front of you. But he said a 700-pound jet ski hit him in the eye, maybe here, and fractured his orbital bone, gave him a black eye. Yet Brutus Beefcake took 2 knees to the face and shattered his whole goddamn face. So you're trying to say that you're way more powerful than Brutus Beefcake. I mean, it's still a solid object hitting you. And that's somebody's knees. Like, that's a human being hitting your face. This is an inanimate object, just on its own, but if obviously something that can be propelled by fuel and human control. And it just gave him, no, I don't fucking believe that one goddamn bit. His skull would have been split. There's no fucking way. And especially not 2 days before. 2 months? 3 months? Maybe. But God, no, I don't believe that. I don't know if Savage did punch him out or they got in a scuffle and somebody hits him. Hogan ended up with a black eye. Maybe Savage didn't punch him. I choose to believe he did, because I choose to believe that Randy did the right thing. But no, I don't believe that 700-pound jet ski thing at all. Like when he slammed a 700-pound giant and tore all the muscles in his back, and Andre died 6 months later, despite the fact that Andre lived nearly 6 years after WrestleMania 3. Fuck that piece of shit Hulk Hogan. No wonder goddamn Brooke wants something to do with that family. Linda and Basil, Bingo Bango, were taking tickets outside of the venue. Obviously not inside the venue. George, the German caucus, reflects on all this. And it was nice to see people getting emotional, because it's been 30 years, or 32 years at this point, and they're reflecting, handling this, and it was cool to see. Again, JR's debut, well, actually, they should have gotten Zoe because she knew Cleopatra and Julius personally, but JR's debut in a toga. It was nice that JR got there. Heenan on a camel. Great stuff. And I talked about this in my WrestleMania 9 Retro Review Redux. But the Stars and the Head Shrinkers was about the only good thing on the show. Yes, Tatanka and Shawn Michaels, but that ended in a DQ. And they put Tito and Papa Shango on the dark match, right? Half of or at least 2 to 3 of these matches went 5 minutes longer than needed. So you're telling me you couldn't have done Tito and Papa Shango? Maybe you couldn't have had a women's match. Maybe you could have had Shawn and Luna against Tatanka and Sherry. You could have done something, whatever. Crush and Doink, and Sam Roberts talking about how his dad saw, the double doinks. It's like, oh, that's great. Yeah. It was also a peek into the future that Matt Bourne was going to dumb himself out of position because he was a piece of shit. Look about the Road Warriors were created. You'll know why I said Matt Bourne's a piece of shit. And I'd say that to anybody that's his kin that's living. Except his daughter actually seems pretty nice. Hogan kept yelling, we're going to kick some ass. We're going to kick some ass. And that was like almost a 20-minute match. Not including the aftermath and the intros and all that stuff. And it was bullshit. It was a terrible goddamn match. Brutus Beefcake could not work in 1993. He had physical charisma up until about 1989, 1990, and then the parasailing thing. And Hogan, leaner, yes, still had appeal, but that wasn't a regular wrestling crowd. You could tell it wasn't a regular wrestling crowd. And he says to Jimmy, going back, looks like I might be doing something else tonight. Vince has Basil get some cash to hand to the boys, to have them go gamble after the show to appeal to the little Caesar's Palace crowd. And then Basil tries to say, let's gamble some of it. Jokingly, maybe. Maybe that's why he was out of the company soon after, because he gambled with company funds like Jack Tunney. No, Jack Tunney took company funds. The gambler was Eddie Quinn. So, Taker wasn't sure about the Vulture, but he did say that the Vulture was appropriate for the match with Giant Gonzalez, and yeah, that was one of the worst matches in Mania history. An absolute abomination. Complete dog shit. 1,000% awful. I mean, goddamn awful. Brett felt that, his reign was cut short. Rush finish. Fuji wasn't ready. Hogan cashed in the Money in the Bank briefcase despite the fact it didn't exist yet. No one wanted Hogan to be champion. Yes, the crowd popped there. Hogan did not appear much on television. Dropped the title to Yokozuna at King of the Ring 93. It didn't draw. It did not draw. People didn't want to see it. And Hogan lost in such a way that he didn't really lose. A cameraman's, bulb flashed in his face. That's not a euphemism. And Hogan passed the torch to Yoko, except not really. Brett felt slighted. And Vlad was there. Nick Khan was an usher. I did not know that. And now, oh boy, Mania 9, not very good. That's really all I have to say right there. Watch it. You'll enjoy it. It would take too long for me to cover every single goddamn detail. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. WrestleMania 9 being the worst WrestleMania of all time, or arguably, if you think so, I'd love to hear it. And I don't really feel bad about any of the shit I said because, yeah, a lot of ego stroking here, and Hogan really should just be lucky that he's still alive. But I wish he wasn't. Anyway, I'm John Retland, and I'll see you soon.